My own mother stared across that courtroom, right into the judge's eyes, and calmly declared that I was mentally incompetent. She said I was too unstable, too broken, to inherit a single penny from the only woman who ever loved me. I sat there in the Milwaukee County Courthouse on March 14th, wearing my grandmother's pearl earrings, and I did not say a single word. I just waited. The judge, Patricia Kowalczyk, sat listening to my mother's young, arrogant attorney, Bradley Fenwick, finish his opening statement. Then she turned to him with an expression I recognized immediately, an expression I had seen 38 times before. The look a seasoned professional gives when something simply doesn't add up. She looked at this inexperienced kid in his oversized suit and asked the question that made my mother's confident smirk disappear in 4 seconds flat. "Counselor, do you truly have no idea who this woman is? The woman your client is calling mentally incompetent. Let me tell you how I ended up in that chair. My name is Nancy Bergland. I am 33 years old, and I am a certified fraud examiner specializing in one specific crime: elder financial abuse. I investigate people who steal from vulnerable seniors, forge checks, fake powers of attorney, manipulated wills. I have seen every trick in the book, and I have testified as an expert witness in 38 cases. 31 of those ended in conviction. 11 of those testimonies happened right here, in Judge Kowalczyk's courtroom. She once said on the record that I was one of the most credible expert witnesses she had encountered in 20 years on the bench. My mother, Daisy Hollister, knew none of this. We hadn't spoken in 19 years. When I was 14, my parents divorced. It was ugly. My mother remarried quickly to a man named Theodore Hollister, and she decided her new life had no room for her old daughter. She didn't fight for custody. She didn't call on my birthday. She abandoned me completely. I was raised by my grandmother, Dorothy Bergland. Grandma Dorothy was a retired elementary school teacher. She never made more than $42,000 a year, but she was meticulous. She kept receipts in labeled envelopes. She could account for every single dollar she had spent since 1987. She balanced her checkbook every Sunday morning with exactly 2 sugars in her coffee. She taught me everything I know. She just didn't realize she was training a fraud examiner. Grandma Dorothy passed away 8 months ago. She was 81 and went peacefully in her sleep while I was holding her hand. She left me everything: the house, the life insurance, and her savings account containing $167,400. It wasn't a fortune, but she had earned every cent. 3 weeks after her funeral, I received a letter. My mother was contesting the will. Daisy Hollister, the woman who hadn't visited her mother in 15 years, who had abandoned her own child, was now accusing me of isolating and manipulating a vulnerable senior into leaving me her entire estate. I actually laughed when I read it, but the laughter died when I saw the second part of her petition. My mother claimed she had documentation proving I had a history of mental instability dating back to my teenage years. She was petitioning the court to declare me mentally incompetent and appoint a conservator to manage my grandmother's money. The proposed conservator, of course, was Daisy Hollister herself. I called my boyfriend, Cameron, that night. Cameron is a wonderful history teacher from a lovely, normal family. He told me I should reach out to my mother. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe this was her clumsy attempt at reconnecting. I love Cameron, but sometimes he acts like he's never met an actual human being outside of a Norman Rockwell painting. My mother remembered the exact dollar amount of the estate, $167,400, and put that number in a legal document. She still doesn't know if my birthday is in March or May. Funny how memory works when money is involved. By the way, if you're finding this story as unbelievable as I did living it, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It genuinely helps me keep sharing these stories, and I read every single comment. Thank you so much for your support. Within 2 weeks, the situation became far more serious. My mother had filed a formal petition demanding emergency powers to freeze the estate accounts. Her evidence was creative, I'll give her that. After she abandoned me, I spent about 8 months talking to a school counselor about depression and adjustment issues, a completely normal response when your mother decides you're not worth keeping. Her attorney presented these teenage records as proof of lifelong mental illness. Worse, she produced a signed statement from my stepsister, Merlin Hollister, whom I hadn't spoken to in 19 years, claiming I was unstable and erratic. It didn't matter that the claim was ridiculous. meticulous. Once a petition is filed, the process starts. You have to hire a lawyer. You have to respond. And while you're proving you aren't crazy, word gets out. My firm placed me on administrative review. I wasn't fired, but I was benched. No new cases, no testimonies. 7 years of building my reputation, and my mother dismantled it with one phone call. I quickly figured out the motive. Theodore and Daisy were broke. Theodore's laundromats were failing. They owed creditors $340,000, and my grandmother's estate was their survival plan. But I didn't know the full scope of what they had done, not yet. I was still listed as a joint holder on my grandmother's bank account. She added me 2 years before she died, primarily for convenience, but I think she was also protecting me. I pulled the bank statements for the last 2 years of her life. I created a spreadsheet. I tracked every deposit, every withdrawal, and that's when I found the first crack in my mother's story. In the final 11 months of my grandmother's life, there were 7 suspicious cash withdrawals, ranging from $4,000 to $12,000. Total amount, $47,850. Every single withdrawal happened within 3 days of a recorded visit from Daisy Hollister. My grandmother had started showing signs of mild cognitive decline. She'd forget her glasses, then quote poetry an hour later. She was vulnerable, and my mother knew it. The woman who was accusing me of elder abuse had been systematically stealing from her own mother for almost a year. I drove to Eau Claire the next weekend to go through the house. I found what I was looking for in her safe deposit box at the First National Bank. Alongside her jewelry and bonds was a small, brown leather journal I'd never seen before. The entries were dated. My grandmother had known exactly what was happening. The first entry nearly broke me. Daisy had called after years of silence, sounding sweet and apologetic. Dorothy wrote that she didn't trust it, but she was old and tired, and maybe people could change. The entries darkened from there. Daisy borrowed $2,000 for an emergency, then $4,000 for Theodore's medical bills. Finally, in December, Daisy and Theodore brought over papers, convincing Dorothy to sign them to help manage her finances. She wrote that she was having a bad day and wasn't sure what she had signed. A week later, on a good day, she realized she had signed a power of attorney, giving Daisy control over her accounts. But the part that destroyed me was this. She was too ashamed to tell me. She didn't want me to see her as weak or fooled. So, she documented everything instead. Every visit, every withdrawal, every lie. The final entry was addressed to me. She apologized, said she knew Daisy would come for the money, and she wanted me to have proof. She wrote that she had always known I was stronger than her. I sat in that bank vault and cried. Then I got to work. The power of attorney was a forgery, not the signature. My grandmother had signed it while confused, but the notarization was fake. The notary stamp belonged to Ray Gustoson, who had retired in 2019. The document was dated 2024. Sloppy. Obvious. A felony. I also dug into Theodore Hollister's background. His first wife had died. His mother, Geraldine, had died in 2017. In both cases, there were questions about the handling of their estates, and money had disappeared. Theodore was not a desperate man. He was a professional predator, and I was not his first victim. I called my attorney, Caroline Jankowski. When I laid out the evidence, the journal, the bank records, the forgery, the pattern, she looked at me and said, "Nancy, this isn't just civil probate anymore. This is federal wire fraud and elder exploitation." I told her exactly what I wanted. I want them to walk into that courtroom thinking they have already won. I want them to commit to their lies under oath. I want the judge to see exactly who they are before I show her who I am. Caroline smiled. She said she had hoped I would say that. For 6 weeks, we built the file. We filed a deliberately bland response to my mother's petition. I simply denied the allegations and requested a hearing. No evidence. No counterclaims. We gave them nothing. When Bradley Fenwick took my deposition, I gave him nothing, too. I was a flat, boring, defeated accountant. My mother watched via video link, and I saw her expression shift from nervous to confused to utterly pleased. She thought I was broken. She thought I had given up. She had no idea she was watching a woman who had cross-examined money launderers and embezzlers for 7 years. She had no idea that the flat, defeated performance was a calculated trap. The week before the hearing, Merlin Hollister, my stepsister, contacted my lawyer. She wanted to meet. We met at a coffee shop. Merlin was thin, tired, and scared. She confessed her father had written the statement and forced her to sign it. She told me about Theodore's mother, Geraldine, who died with real dementia. Theodore, managing her finances, had drained over $200,000 from her accounts. Merlin said Theodore had done this for years. When I asked her why she was telling me, she said simply, "I'm tired. I can't go down with them." I got her cooperation. Cameron was waiting at my apartment when I got back. We talked, and I showed him the whole file. The journal, the forgery, the pattern. He read everything in silence. When he finished, he didn't look at me with pity or even anger. He looked at me with immense respect. He told me he would be in that courtroom. The night before the hearing, I drove to the cemetery. I didn't get out of the car. I just sat there thinking about what Grandma Dorothy had taught me. Paper trails do not lie. People can twist the truth, but numbers are honest. Tomorrow, the numbers were going to speak. March 14th, 8:47 a.m., Milwaukee County Courthouse. I wore a professional navy blazer. Unremarkable. I was there to win, not make a statement. Daisy arrived late, wearing a matching navy blazer and, sickeningly, my grandmother's pearl earrings. Theodore followed, wearing the look of a practiced, supportive husband. Judge Kowalczyk entered. She sat down, put on her glasses, and looked at the parties. She looked at me, and I saw that flicker of recognition again. She didn't say anything. Bradley Fenwick began his opening, painting a picture of me as an unstable, isolated adult who had taken advantage of a vulnerable old woman. He never once mentioned my actual job. When he finished, Daisy stood for her personal statement. Her voice rose. She pointed directly at me and called me mentally sick, incompetent, and said I should never be allowed to control finances. I kept my hands folded and waited. When Daisy was done, Judge Kowalczyk turned to Bradley and asked that simple, devastating question again. "Counselor, do you truly have no idea who this woman is? The woman your client just called mentally incompetent." Bradley stammered. "She is an accountant, Your Honor." The judge looked back at my attorney, Caroline. Caroline stood. She didn't give a speech. She simply said, "We would like to present evidence that will reframe the court's understanding of this case." Caroline opened her briefcase. First, the bank records. She walked the judge through the $47,850 drain, linking each withdrawal to Daisy's visits. Bradley went pale. Next, the forged power of attorney. She presented the retirement papers of Ray Gustoson, proving the notary stamp was invalid. Bradley looked physically ill. Then, the journal. Caroline read selected entries aloud, Grandma Dorothy's voice from beyond the grave, detailing the deception, the shame, and the fear. I watched my mother's face cycle from shock to cold indignation. She wasn't ashamed of what she'd done. She was furious she'd been caught. Finally, Caroline presented the pattern, Theodore's mother's estate, the previous suspicious deaths, and the note that the FBI had been notified and was opening an investigation into wire and mail fraud. The courtroom was silent. Bradley asked for a recess. I watched him whisper, frantically, to Daisy. I couldn't hear him, but I saw her reaction. Her face went from red to ashen. He was telling her who I was, what I did, and how many times I had been right here, winning. She looked at me then. For the first time in 19 years, my mother really looked at me. I just looked back and waited. When court resumed, Bradley announced his client wished to withdraw her petition. Judge Kowalczyk shook her head. Given the evidence presented, she said, I am not prepared to simply dismiss this matter. She denied the petition with prejudice and announced she was referring the entire case to the district attorney and the FBI field office for immediate criminal prosecution. It was over in less than 2 hours. Not with a dramatic confrontation, but with quiet, devastating evidence. That's how justice works, not with explosions, but with paper trails. The FBI moved fast. 3 days later, Special Agent Tina Morales called me. Theodore and Daisy Hollister were arrested on April 2nd on federal charges of wire fraud, mail fraud, and financial exploitation. Theodore's mother's estate investigation was reopened. They found over $200,000 in unexplained transfers. Merlin testified for the prosecution and was granted immunity. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I was there for the verdict. Daisy Hollister was found guilty on 4 counts and sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Theodore received 6.5 years. Their house was sold. The laundromats were seized. Every piece of the life they built on stolen money was dismantled. I kept Grandma Dorothy's journal. It's not evidence anymore. It's the last thing she ever wrote, her voice preserved on paper, reminding me that even when she was scared, she never stopped fighting for me. My mother thought I was weak, because I was quiet. She thought I was broken because I didn't fight back immediately. She forgot that I was raised by a woman who kept receipts. Tell me what you think. Was I too harsh, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know in the comments below.